Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Disco Inferno ball python. The Disco Inferno actually consists of two genes, the disco and the fire, and it makes a really impressive combination. And if you work other genes into the Disco Inferno, you can get some really mind-blowing combinations. As a matter of fact, I think the Disco Inferno is kind of like a hidden gem in ball pythons. Not a lot of people really know the potential of the Disco Inferno. As a matter of fact, the disco is a lilac with several genes. It's actually a lilac with the fire, the vanilla, and the sulfur. If you actually look at the base genes on all those, they look almost identical. Sometimes it's really difficult to tell one from another, but if you actually make a super fire with two copies of the fire, you get an all-white snake with black eyes. And when you make a Disco Inferno, I'd say it looks kind of like a vanilla cream with the vanilla and the fire. The only difference being that a lot of times in your Disco Infernos, you'll get a lot of high white. It almost looks like pied in a lot of cases, which is really kind of crazy. So in this video, I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the amazing potential of the Disco Inferno ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the two genes that make up the Disco Inferno. And the first one I want to show you is this one right here. As a matter of fact, this one is listed as a disco or a fire, and it's really difficult to tell the difference between them. As far as I know, a lot of people really don't know, the visual indication between the disco and the fire. There's a lot of fire discos. Now keep in mind, if you actually take a Disco Inferno and you breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as disco, half come out as fire, and you don't know which one is which, and that I think is kind of the challenging part of the project. Both of them look the same. And here is another, take a look at this snake. This one's kind of crazy too. This one is either a fire or a vanilla, so you can't even tell the difference between this. This is actually from a vanilla cream, which I would say looks really similar to the Disco Inferno, except I'd say they almost look exactly the same, except when you mix them in with other combos. I think the Disco Inferno has more potential for some really crazy looking snakes, and the Disco Inferno also brings in a lot of the white that you really don't see in your vanilla creams. A lot of times you get some pied looking snakes that looks like it's a visual pied in the Disco Infernos, and you really don't see that a lot with the vanilla cream. If you actually take the fire and you mix it with the disco, take a look at this. This is what you get. You get a Disco Inferno, and this is a really amazing example of the Disco Inferno. Look at how bright and like a high contrast this is. Really crazy pattern, pretty amazing. And take a look at the white on the bottom. Sometimes this white will come up and it'll look like pied all the way around. Sometimes half the snake is completely white, like it looks like a visual pied. Makes a really amazing combination. And there's actually different versions of the Disco Inferno. I pulled up a couple more here. Take a look at this. This is a Disco Inferno. It's also known as the Disco Cream because, the vanilla cream is actually the vanilla and the fire. So this is like the disco version of the vanilla cream, kind of a play on words for kind of the common names for some of these snakes. And you can definitely see on this one, it has a lot of white coming up the belly. Pretty amazing. And here is one more. Take a look at this one. This one is pretty amazing. These all have the same genes. This is just the disco and the fire. And sometimes they can be like a bright yellow and a really high contrast, and sometimes they can be kind of like have this soft creamy color of the snake, and it really depends on what you're looking for. And it seems like a lot of the older ones seem to be kind of a lot more of a creamy color. I'm not sure if the really high intensity ones kind of brown out a little bit like this, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Is you're looking kind of at some older ones, it seems like maybe they lose some of the color and the high contrast. And you can actually see on this one, it has a lot of high white. It looks like this could be a visual pied, although there is no pied in the mix. Pretty amazing combination. So I'm going to show you some of these other genes mixed in with the Disco Inferno so you can really see the ultimate potential of working other genes into the mix. And I want to start with the pastel. The pastel has a pretty dramatic effect on the Disco Inferno, and the pastel is pretty variable by itself. Some of them can be really super bright yellow like this one. This one's probably one of the brightest pastels that I've seen. And a lot of times just the standalone pastels, most of the times they'll kind of brown out as they age and mature and turn into into adults. And some of them have a really crazy pattern. Some of them almost have like tiger stripes, almost looks kind of inchy-like with a pattern reduction. And some of them don't look like they're reduced at all. It's pretty amazing how variable the pastel can be. And here's what happens if you work pastel into the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this. This is a really crazy combination. And at first glance, you know, the first thing that I thought of when I saw this almost looks like a freeway, like a pastel freeway with the pastel, the asphalt, and the yellow belly. And that's another allelic complex that is kind of still challenging, you know, almost as challenging as this, because if you actually take a freeway and breed it to something else, you either get the yellow bellies or the asphalts, which look almost like normals. It's kind of the same on this, where the, you know, the fire, the disco, the vanilla, and the sulfur, they pretty much all look the same as a standalone morph. So here is the yellow belly. The yellow belly is a really subtle morph by itself, but when you mix it in with other genes, you can get some really amazing, really dramatic effects in a lot of cases. And if you actually take two yellow bellies and breed them together, you get a super yellow belly, which is called an ivory, which is an all-white snake with black eyes. Pretty amazing. And here's what happens if you work yellow belly into the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this. It really brings out a lot of the yellow, kind of this creamy yellow color from the yellow belly. And kind of the interesting thing with yellow belly is I've noticed on a lot of pied mixes, when you mix in yellow belly with pied, a lot of times you get right along the kind of the edge of the white, you'll see a really jagged pattern from the yellow belly. And it almost seems like you're almost getting like a similar effect on this, where the kind of the outline of the color is a little more jagged due to the yellow belly. Kind of an interesting effect. And here's what happens if you actually take the yellow belly and the pastel and mix it with the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this. This is this is really crazy. Take a look at this crazy snake. And this almost mirrors what you'd actually see in some of the like the pastel freeways and the super pastel freeways. Although the pattern is a lot more jumbled up. That is, you know, as far as something I can compare this to, that is probably the closest. Makes for a really amazing combo. And kind of the interesting thing is how light the head is. Usually you see a really light head in some of your super pastels, but if you actually mix one copy of pastel with certain combinations, sometimes it'll completely wipe out all the pattern on the head. Pretty amazing. So here is the lesser. The lesser is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you breed a lesser with anything in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, like bamboo, Russo, Mojave, Mystic, Phantom, Mocha, Special, all those are in the blue-eyed leucistic, you end up with an all-white snake with blue eyes. And here's what happens if you work lesser into the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this. This is a really amazing snake. I think this is one of my favorite combinations. It almost has this bright yellow, kind of a creamy look with kind of this electric pattern coming through here. Makes for a really amazing snake. And look at the pied kind of look coming through. There's no pied at all in this combination. It is really amazing. If you actually take a look at the prices on these are, they can kind of vary quite a bit. This one was $750 back in 2018. Pretty amazing combination. So here is the spider. Let me tell you, when you work spider into the Disco Inferno, you get some really crazy effects like you've never seen before. And the spider is kind of an interesting gene just by itself. It kind of has the spider web pattern right down the top. It almost looks like it has, you know, calico in it. Although it's just one gene, the spider is actually a dominant gene, so you breed it to something else and half the offspring come out of spider. And usually the spiders have a really crazy head stamp too. That's kind of the characteristic of a spider. So here's what happens if you take spider and you work it into the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this crazy snake. That is one of the most amazing combos that I've ever seen. If someone actually handed me this snake, I would say, yeah, that is a pied combo, because it has all this white in there where it doesn't have any pied at all in the mix. It's just disco, spider, and fire. Pretty amazing that they have these kind of a pied look. And this one was actually, this one sold for $1,000. Of course, it was back in 2016. I haven't really looked at, you know, some of the recent prices on a lot of these things. I usually don't look at the prices, and then a lot of people ask after the video, they're like, hey, can you show us the prices so if we can actually see if we can afford to get into these projects. But I think the original genes, if you actually look just at the base genes, you could probably pick them up for relatively little money. So here is the cinnamon. The cinnamon's kind of interesting. It's actually a dark morph. If you breed two cinnamons together, you get a super cinnamon, which is a completely patternless snake that is, sometimes it's like a cinnamon color and sometimes it's completely jet black. Pretty amazing. And here's what happens if you work cinnamon into the Disco Inferno. Take a look at this. This is kind of interesting because it really didn't darken it that much. Maybe a little bit on the top. It looks like the Disco Inferno is really a visually dominant combination, even overwhelms the cinnamon. And then of course the line right from the top is from the cinnamon. Pretty amazing combo. And it looks like another pied combination, even though it doesn't have pied in the mix. Pretty amazing. So here is the last one I wanted to show you. This is a really crazy combination, probably the craziest one I've seen over here on Morphmarket, and this is the clown. The clown, when it comes to recessive combos, I'd say the clown is probably the king of combos when it comes to recessives. You mix anything in with clown and you get some really crazy results. And clown, it's no wonder that clown is one of the most sought after genes in all of ball pythons. Although it's kind of expensive, I think that's kind of, it's kind of a supply and a demand thing. I think if clowns were really cheap, there'd be a lot more people buying into clowns. And the other problem with clown is that it's a recessive mutation. So you need two copies of the gene for a visual. But let me tell you, clowns are pretty awesome. And if you mix clown into the Disco Inferno, take a look at this crazy snake. That thing is out of this world. Take a look at that. You can definitely tell from kind of the head shape and the pattern on the head that this is definitely a clown, and it has this really crazy pattern, and you get a lot of this pied white coming in like this. This is really pretty amazing. I bet this one's pretty expensive. Actually, I haven't looked at the price. Yeah, this one actually sold for $3,000. Pretty amazing combo. As a matter of fact, this could be a world's first. This is a one-of-a-kind girl. Oh yeah, I'm thinking a lot of these Disco Infernos, it's not really that popular. So if you're actually looking into making a lot of world's firsts, mixing other genes into something and taking credit for the world's first. Some people, that's pretty much their goal of their breeding operation. I just want to be the world's first and make some stuff that no one has ever seen. Let me tell you, Disco Inferno is the way to go. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Prepper Girl asks, can I breed a TSK axanthic to a VPI axanthic? And that is a very good question. So the TSK and the VPI are two different lines of the axanthic gene, which is a recessive mutation, and they're not compatible as far as I know. So if you actually bred those two together, essentially what you get is you would get normal looking snakes that are het for TSK and het for VPI. And it'd actually get really confusing if you bred those double hets back together, because when you produce a visual axanthic, you wouldn't know if it was the TSK axanthic or the VPI until you actually proved it out. So if you actually sold some of those axanthics to someone else, they could buy it thinking it's a different line of axanthic, and when they start breeding it into their collection, they can kind of be tricked into thinking they have one versus the other, and they end up producing all normal looking snakes instead of the visual axanthics. And axanthic, essentially what it does is it strips all the color where you're left with the black and the white and the silver snake. It's a really awesome genetic mutation. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people have asked me, hey, can I breed these two together and get a double visual axanthic, where you have a visual axanthic that is both TSK and the VPI, which would be a really crazy snake. I don't even know what it would look like. If it would look maybe something like the Stormtrooper. I don't know if you've seen the Stormtrooper snake, but it's really like a high contrast, kind of an unexplainable, kind of a weird anomaly. As a matter of fact, when they produced the Stormtrooper, a lot of people are thinking they might have Desert Ghost in the mix, although I have seen some Desert Ghost axanthics that don't really look like the Stormtrooper. But I think the Stormtrooper is kind of a one-of-a-kind, one-of-a-kind animal that is really impressive. And if you actually produce the double visual axanthic, it would be, I'm sure it would be a world's first. It would be a really interesting project, but if it actually looked like just a regular axanthic, you wouldn't actually know if you hit the double axanthic, which could be another kind of a cog in the wheel when you're working, kind of going down this rabbit hole of the double axanthic project. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.